Welcome to the Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dellis. On this episode, we take a look at what fairies, butterfly wings, and biodegradable materials all have in common.
In creature mythology, pixies, fairies, and sprites are sometimes used interchangeably. And although there are some similarities, there are so many differences as well. The reason the three have often been mixed up is likely due to different cultures using different languages to talk about the same or similar thing. But don't worry, you have us to differentiate the three.
Yes. Fairies, pixies, and sprites are all small and magical, and they all live in nature and are generally helpful, and they all have a mean streak, some more than others. Fairies are found in cultures all over the world and are often portrayed as ushering in the seasons, helping nature grow, protecting their humans if they're a house fairy, and playing jokes on other creatures and humans. Sometimes fairies have wings, and sometimes they don't. Originally, fairies were feared and considered dangerous and powerful.
I think Tinkerbell movies, right?
Yes, definitely a slight, well, she was like a little jealous. A jealous mean streak.
Well, I've had to watch all of the Tinkerbell movies, and some of them were mean, and some of them were nice, and it was all over the place. Some had wings, some didn't have wings, and they ushered in the seasons.
And some were kind of androgynous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The word fairy only goes back to Europe in the Middle Ages. However, there are descriptions of
Hold on.
What?
Was Tinkerbell a fairy or a pixie or a sprite?
I thought she was a fairy.
Does it ever say?
I don't know. Maybe she's a pixie.
Oh my God, I'm going to Google it right now. Wait a second.
We're going to have to
Thank God for Google. Hold on. Is Tinkerbell a fairy? And Google says, in original play and novel, Tinkerbell is a fairy who mended pots and kettles, an actual tinker of the fairy folk. Oh, that's how she got her name, because she sent when she flew around.
Oh, see,
she had the sound of bells, and she was a tinker.
Yeah, she was a part of the Tinker bunch. If you watch the movies, you would know that.
Well, I have boys, and you have girls, so we didn't watch Tinkerbell movies. Yeah. Okay, sorry, we digress.
The word fairy only comes back to Europe in the Middle Ages. However, there are descriptions of ancient Indian semi-divine celestial musicians that sound like fairies called Gandharva, written in Sanskrit. The descriptions in Greek mythology of nymphs sound like fairies. The Janai in Arabic mythology and similar characters from Samoan, the Arctic people, and other indigenous Americans also make you think of fairies. So it's safe to say that fairy-like creatures and humans have been together for a long time.
Pixies are also small and magical, likely Celtic in origin. They're portrayed as dressed in green, dancing in the moonlight to the music of frogs and crickets. I would love to do that. I would totally be a good pixie. And they love making people lost, scaring girls, knocking on walls, and blowing out candles to irritate the humans. The earliest mention of a pixie comes from the 1837 book, The Borders of the Tamar and the Tavi, Volume 3, by British writer Anna Eliza Bray. They're said to be much smaller than a fairy or a sprite. Their skin can be either blue or green, their eyes and ears pointed, and their wings are like a butterfly or a dragonfly.
Pixies are said to use their magical powers to affect human behavior, mostly so that the children and girls will dance with them. And like the fairies, they're very in tune with nature, making flowers grow and taming wild animals. They love horses and can often be found in a horse's mane. Oh, that's like such pretty imagery, isn't it?
Yeah,
like thinking like flowers.
Right, maybe that's
pixies.
why they used to like weave flowers into the horse's manes. Oh, that's
It just looks so pretty.
I like that.
Like fairies, they live underground. If humans see mounds of earth or rings of mushrooms, then fairy or pixie homes are likely underneath.
Oh my gosh, I hope that us saying that doesn't make people like start digging if they see these things.
Oh, I hope not. You should leave those alone.
Yeah.
I've seen several fairy rings, and I totally think that like, something's going on, but it's probably something else. But it'd be really cool to think that it was this. Yes, don't dig up fairy rings. Leave them be.
Yeah.
But
they have
don't,
that mean streak.
Right? Yeah, we don't need to do it back to them, right? Because it just makes it worse. But they don't always live together. Fairies and pixies are often portrayed as fighting each other when one invades the other's homeland.
Yeah, so imagine what they would do to you if you started digging up their house.
Leave them be.
And then there are, of course, the sprites. The word sprite comes from the Latin and French word for spirit, as it was believed sprites were the souls of the dead in winged form, like teeny tiny angels. Their wings are said to be larger than their bodies and covered in waterproof scales of iridescent colors. While pixies love to frolic in the meadows or woods, sprites prefer to be near a water source like fountains, rivers, or ponds, which is perfect for their waterproof wings.
Butterflies and moths are thought by some to be the inspiration for the fairy, sprite, and pixie mythology. And it's easy to understand why when you think about their beautiful wings. Butterfly and moth wings are pretty cool, so colorful.
Yeah.
And you know how when you touch them, it looks just like fairy dust that's kind of left on your fingers. And if their wings are colorful or iridescent, then that fairy dust is sparkly and colorful. Well, it's not really fairy dust, and it's reminiscent of the waterproof wings of the sprites.
That's right. It's not fairy dust. It's scales. Their wings are covered in thousands of colorful scales, about 600 per square millimeter. That's a lot. I was always told not to touch the wings of a butterfly or moth because it could kill them, and that's actually true. The oils on our fingers remove the scales, and that could shorten the life of the insect. But if the scales are so important, then why do they come off so easily, you might ask? Well, the answer is to enable the butterfly to escape from a spider's web. The scales allow them to sort of slide away, leaving the scales stuck to the gossamer threads and allowing the butterfly to fly away. Of course, some of its scales has just come off, so they're probably not going to live much longer, but...
Well, it depends on how much comes off, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Butterfly, spider webs are kind of sticky.
Yeah, they are.
I worry for them.
Well, these scales are what give them their colors and patterns. They absorb sunlight and help them fly. Butterfly wings are made of thin layers of chitin, which are proteins and are the second most abundant biopolymer in the world. The chitin are supported by a system of veins in which oxygen flows, and the scales provide a protective covering. When the scales develop in the chrysalis, each one develops a nanometer high groove, sort of like a rain gutter that helps guide water off the wing.
So there are researchers at MIT who believe that if they understand how butterflies make their scales, they can replicate the process to create a biodegradable material that could provide temperature control and waterproofing. And of course, the colors would be just as vibrant as a butterfly's wings. The researchers used speckle correlation reflection phase microscopy to look say that 5 times fast, my goodness, to look inside a chrysalis during the butterfly's development.
Their idea is to grow the cells that form the scales and create a biodegradable material that can be sprayed onto buildings, vehicles, or clothing to add color and waterproofing. One of their goals is to have some sort of trigger in or on the spraying device that makes the cells grow scales to the specification of the user. For example, if you want your jacket to be hot pink with no texture and you want a lot of water protection, you could choose that and spray away. And I cannot wait for this invention. Can you imagine? All we have to do is make basic clothing, out of just some random material and then just spray stuff on it, and we could change it daily.
Yeah, and you can actually, their idea, like you said, is to change the way that you want things. So that example is if you want a hot pink with no texture. But they're also thinking of ways where you can change it to any color, which shouldn't be too much of an issue. But the really interesting part is that they'll change the texture. So the scales that grow from these cells can be bumpy, like that popcorn ceilings that we have, or it can be suede and kind of velvety, or it can have patterns and be raised in a 3D way, raised in certain areas. It's just wild to think of. But the idea, this is so science fiction to me, because the idea that you can just, I think I'm going to open up my closet full of nothing but white pieces of cotton or whatever, pick out one and then just spray this. I want, neon green with checks of pink or whatever. Just spray it on. And then, it's raining. So thank God this is waterproof. This is just wild.
It's so cool. I'm thinking of it as if this works and this happens, this is a whole new art form, because you can have artists creating these special designs, but then you could have ways of make it your own design, take that design template and okay, you know what I mean? Paint by numbers, but on a jacket.
Well, and the other thing to think of too is that it would actually be alive. These are living cells that they are replicating. So it's kind of ewy, gooey, icky to me to think of I'm spraying these growing live cells onto my clothing and then I'm going to wear it around. Like it's alive. I know it's not alive, but like it's just weird.
It is weird, but it's interesting to see what they come up with. And as long as, we're not harming any animals or plants or the earth, and however these cells are grown, I think it'll be really cool to see how we move forward and use the earth.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at the Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at the Unusual History of Everything podcast. Find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for The Unusual History of Everything. Da, 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 da.